Hey, folks, believe it or not, it's a new year. Time for a new crew call. This is crew call 5-5, January 2025. And I'm here with my erstwhile podcaster, Scott Mason. We're going to talk buildings today because I'm in a building mode. Scott's always in a building mode. So that's what we're talking about. How you doing,
Yeah,
Scott?
we're gonna crack this egg, Mike, tonight.
We're going to crack a lot of eggs tonight, I think. How else are you going to make an omelet, right? Um, This was actually your idea to record, Scott. But some people have probably figured I'm done doing podcasts, and you catch me on the right day, I'd say, yeah, I'm done doing podcasts. I've done so many, so many. But um, I'll never do a podcast that I'm not enthusiastic about. So it's traditionally been something where I'm having a conversation with somebody that I'm interested in talking with and a subject that I'm interested in talking about. And you buzzed me up and said, "Hey, let's talk about Foster Wheeler." And I'm all in on Foster Wheeler right now.
Well,
What were your thoughts leading up to that?
yeah, no, you've got your sleeves rolled up and you're in the middle of a big ass project, or as they say in England, a big ass project. And it seemed right that we kind of have a conversation about this.
Yep.
You're posting left and right on your Facebook site, which is wonderful. You are pulling in new members at the rate of about six a day.
Unbelievable, really. I don't really fully understand if it's just seemed like at one point, the whole cliche about going viral, right?
Yeah.
I had one post that I did that was like 100, I think it's over 145,000 post reach now, which is a number that's so ridiculously large that you just raise an eyebrow at it. But it's just been ever since that point, enough of it has sort of connected the way things interconnect that um, it's it's just kind of gone on from there. And every time I make a video, a visual post of something construction related, particularly layout construction related, um, and even sometimes ops photos, we'll do that too. And some of the most obscure ones just kind of take off. A lot of the growth has come from all over the world,
Yep.
which is also interesting and heartening. So I don't know. I like approving new people, and there's very few people I turn down. Just the obvious bots.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the posts are viral or near viral, but I think the Facebook page just reached a point of critical mass too.
Yeah, well, that time when you put all of the pictures in, I think it's probably after the last podcast when you put up a bunch of pictures of your project.
Mm.
That went viral too. I mean, there was a tremendous response to that. So clearly, there's a real interest, I think, across the board on technique. And I think a lot of people are there to learn. We're sharing, techniques and answering questions and things like that. So I'm sure that drives a lot of it. A lot of it comes in answering and responding to questions that people post after you put something up there. I think you had that too on your posting. So uh,
It's a purient society, and many years ago there was a movie that came out with Peter Sellers called Being There. And if you haven't seen Being There, I highly recommend it. It's a little esoteric, but the message is funny and poignant at the same time. And one of his statements is, "I like to watch." And I think that it goes for us, right?
yep.
Because I think if we were on the other side of these posts, we'd be the same way about it. But
Well, there's many posts
people
that I see elsewhere that I'm
absolutely.
the fan at that point, asking, you know, we've been doing this for a long, long, long time, but we don't know everything. Sometimes I'll
Well,
see,
two
you know,
longs, not three.
but sometimes I'll see something and I'll go, "Oh, that looks pretty good," and I'll say to the guy, "How'd you do that?" And there's always new stuff that comes out and new stuff, new other ways to do things. I'm seeing it all the time, really.
Well, I think if you stop learning, you start dying.
The other thing I have found, and maybe this is less so for you because although I consider myself a structure builder and a
Mhm.
builder, at heart, really, uh,
Yep.
you're the structure guy. I mean, you had your own company, you designed kits, you sold them. So that's really your whole, in past raison d'etre. So, but I don't know if it's true that that you built a zillion different kinds of structures or not. I'm kind of fuzzy on that actually. Like, were most of your structures like just basically laser kits, or did you build? I know you built a plaster cast roundhouse one time, but I mean, were you building all kinds of stuff out of all kinds of materials?
Yeah. Um, and I may have mentioned this before, but I mean, I started off with military models.
I forgot about
So,
that.
I've worked with plastics, wood, plaster, resin, uh, 3D printed material,
You have a
paper.
preference?
I'm sorry.
You have a preference?
Um, I like wood. Uh, and this project that I'm working on, we'll talk about later, as a reflection of that, there's a lot you can do with wood. We're
Yep.
cutting our own brick into it. Uh, it takes paint very well. You can seal it. Uh, it's easy to cut. So if I had to choose, I used to love the plaster craftsman structure kits.
Now, I've never
Uh,
done one of those. I've worked with plaster abutments and retaining walls and things like that.
yeah.
But I've never, I don't think I've ever built a plaster structure kit.
Well, South River Model Works and Bob Van Gelder, really became famous in the hobby for um, manufacturing hydrocal based kits.
Right.
And he did that for a number of years before he went to resin. And I found the plaster was just, again, you can seal it, but you can also leave it in its raw
Stain
form
it.
and
Yeah.
stain it if
Yeah.
that's the way you want to go.
I've seen
Uh,
some kits come out that look really, really good.
yeah, the detail is fantastic. And you mentioned that roundhouse. I built, oh, probably
It's the one you
that
drove to
roundhouse,
California, right?
yeah, 10 different times for 10 different people, including
It's,
myself. And that actually, that if you go on YouTube and you do a search of the Donner Pass, Southern Pacific Donner Pass subdivision, model railroad, a lengthy video made by the owner of that model railroad will come up, and those roundhouses are prominently displayed in there.
I'll have to
And that
do
is an
that.
extremely impressive
You
model
had,
railroad.
you had showed me pics back in the day, but it'd be interesting to see the owner's take on
Yep.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
I've always considered myself a guy who can do anything with plastic, and it's always been my modeling medium. Um,
Yep.
but I would say in the last year or so, I've really started to build almost exclusively in wood. Like the last thing I did in plastic was the roundhouse, but then I did that big long Milazzo Industries, that maybe
Mhm.
we talked about the last time. And I built a bunch of little small custom structures to match a prototype scene that'll be for the Pocono Northeast. And I did that curtain wall building all out of wood. And this Foster Wheeler building is primarily wood. It's good. It's kind of a hybrid. We'll get into that, a little bit about some of the techniques on it. But I don't know. You know what makes me like working with wood, and you're gonna laugh, but it's canopy glue. I love canopy glue.
Oh, well,
It's just
I'm
so
not going to laugh
good.
because, literally, I've gone
Probably your
through,
idea.
yeah. Well, and stupid me, right? I mean, I should be getting residuals. That was my baby. I brought that into the hobby, and I don't care, whatever the legacy is.
Well,
That's
and
my,
I used to feel that way about Cypox, you know what I mean? Until
yeah.
that's that had a bad ending. So we're not going to talk about Cypox.
Bad ending.
Um, um, the funny story is, I think you saw probably that Ken McCory came up, and I know you've been down to Ken's.
Uh-huh.
Couple of quick things on that little visit while we're on the glue subject before we get right into the meat of Foster Wheeler. Ken's one of those guys who, if there's a problem that I need to have solved, he's already done it because he's 10 years ahead of me, and
Sure.
he's just basically done everything there is to do on a giant model railroad. When he came by, I said, "So would you say that mine is about a tenth the size of yours?" He said, "No, not really." He says, "It's about half." Really? He said, but his is like a big clear span, one big building, not a pole or a stairway or a, utility room or anything interrupting
Yeah.
anything. So but I was floored by that. And he told me the square footage and I said, geez, that's about right. I can't believe mine is half the size of his.
Well, and that, and you have what I would categorize as a very large home model railroad.
Right.
Um, he has a monstrosity of a
Yeah.
home.
When you double it, that's a
Yeah.
lot, but again, I think he's one of those guys who's up late, not sleeping much, working all the
Sure.
time on it, full of ideas.
Sure.
We're
You
kindred spirits in many ways.
when you double the size, I think that, probably by a factor of 4 or 5, you're magnifying the maintenance,
Oh
the
yeah.
cleaning, the care of track work, all those sorts of things.
Better be built to military grade standards, boy.
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
I
And I
think
don't,
this
and I
is.
know his is.
The reason I brought him up in relation to glue was he told me that you probably heard of Roman's wallpaper paste,
Yes.
one of the big brands, and it's what I used to put up my last couple of backdrops.
Yeah,
Uh,
it was very
green.
popular with the Romans, by the way.
So Jeff Adams had turned Confalone and I onto that, and we were both like, "Yeah, this is what you want to use." Well, that
Mhm.
company that does all this wallpaper stuff has a seam sealer, Roman seam sealer, and that's
Okay.
is canopy glue. So at any given time, if you run out of canopy glue, you can run down a Home Depot or Lowe's and grab yourself a Roman seam sealer, and it is
Really?
canopy glue. I built
That
the whole Milazzo Industries using a tube of that.
that information would have been helpful about 14 months ago when I started working on this exhibit. I've gone through, no exaggeration, a full gallon canopy glue
Well, in the small tubes, right?
in the small bottles. Yeah.
Right, right. I believe it. I
Oh,
believe it.
yeah.
I
And
usually
yeah,
figure about one small bottle per structure. Seems to be about right.
hard to calculate because, like Foster Wheeler, there are some large structures
A
that
lot
make
of
up
gluing
four of
there.
that.
Yeah, that's I think probably maybe one and a half of them. But we'll get into
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
just as a final tip on that, he told me to try canopy glue for repairing Delrin railings. He says it works great on on a locomotive.
Really.
Yeah.
I'll
Or
be
on like the
interested to hear the
Atherns where
report
they
on
all
that.
fall off,
Yeah.
it works better than CA because it just grabs onto everything as you'll see coming up here. So
Yeah.
I uh, I had told you right before we started recording that I was going to ask you some questions specific about Foster Wheeler, and then I thought, why not do it as part of the show? So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to share a screen, excuse me, that has some images of Foster Wheeler, and I'm going to ask you some questions. We'll talk about it. Okay, so
Okay.
let me just do a share here. See if we can do this in real time here. I'm going to share screen 3 and say share. And now I'm going to punch up a historical photo of Foster Wheeler. Now, you can see this, right?
Yes.
So the deal here is that this was an aerial photo of Foster Wheeler under construction. The resolution isn't great, but it's the only photo of Foster Wheeler from this perspective that I've been able to find.
And
So
what year was that, Mike?
I think this is late 50s.
Okay.
So can you see my cursor moving around?
Yes, I can.
All right. So if you see on this end here, you see how there's like a big door here?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what that thing is sticking out of it, but I modeled that big door.
Yep.
I also put a door on the end of this, which is going to be a truck dock. And again, there's some artistic license involved here. This doorway, you see how the tracks come off here and take a hard left and go into the building? That
Yes.
track actually goes through the building and stubs out a little bit on the other side. I didn't
Okay.
model that. I couldn't make the bend in that location. It didn't have enough distance between here and the tracks.
Yep.
I did model this track over into here with a pair of tracks. So this is where all the steel and raw materials will come in.
Uh-huh.
And you may have noticed, as some of the comments in the group, Mike Maz had I guess he worked at MK, Morrison Knudsen, and
Yep.
Morrison Knudsen took over this facility after Foster Wheeler left. And he sent me some pictures of it in MK days that showed a much clearer view of what's going on this sort of elevator looking area.
Yep.
So I didn't notice it in this photo, but there's like a little bump out here and a window and all of that I didn't model. But when I saw his pictures, I thought that's clear enough for me to model.
Yep. Yep.
So here's a question I would have asked you. Now, if you look at this photo, the roof is black, right?
Yes.
Here too. All the
Yep.
roof sections here are black.
Yep.
Just keep that in your mind's eye.
Yep.
I'm not going to do something dangerous and just kind of use the advance here and see if it does anything. It does not. Okay. So I'll just call up now another one. So here's Foster Wheeler aerial view, much better resolution from the opposite corner.
Yep.
Now, this roof here, I'm not even sure yet if I'm going to build this low section because it's gone
Yep.
MK days and who knows when it left.
Yep.
In MK days, as you'll see moving forward over in the right here, there's like an addition on here. It's like a multi-story office building. But if you look at this little spot, it still looks a little bit black, but look at how light colored the roof is and whether that's just dirt or bare concrete and black has worn off. I'm not really sure. How does it, what does that say to you?
Well, so it's one of a couple of things. So that first roof was more than likely rolled roofing.
You think so?
Yep. So,
It looks very, very smooth. All of these pictures, the roof looks very smooth.
yep. The people that did that work were experts. And I think that you would have to, that one may not be. I would argue that the first one definitely is. And I would argue that if you could, zoom in on that picture without it totally falling apart, and I know the resolution prohibits you doing that, you would eventually see seams.
I see this,
So
I see this seam going across here
yep.
and but I don't know what that is. And there's like a
Now,
one over here.
I say that because that was, kind of the standard at the time.
This is a steel framed structure.
Yep. But shortly after that, or in that same time period, membrane rubber roofing was also becoming a thing.
Well,
So
what's under it? It would be my question.
Corrugated B panels, they're called. So it's a corrugated raised seam material. Could be aluminum, could be tin, probably aluminum in this time frame.
Well, it is interesting that the whole skin of it's corrugated panels, for a building
Yeah.
that large. I was a little surprised to see that, but it makes for a very, very cool structure. You had remarked on how big this thing is. It's incredibly huge. So I'm modeling it about 90% of the height. I'm modeling it almost the full width because when you think about it, these doors and all of that, you can't really shrink those.
Right.
So I'm modeling it basically the full width, and I'm modeling it about half the length of this building. And the model is gigantic. So it looks big enough that it captures the feel of this big honking structure, but in the space that I have, anything bigger, I think would have been ridiculous.
Yep.
So my question to you is right now, I'm at the point where, and I should also tell you that there are full-length gutters, and here's the downspouts,
Yep.
So there are full-length gutters that are on the edge of this building that I'm going to do. So now it's a black and white photo, both of these. What color would you do the roof as?
Well, so this building is still under construction in this photograph, correct?
Well, in this photograph, I don't know. Look at all the cars. I think it's in full production. I think in the first photo, it was under construction.
Okay, but this isn't long after construction was completed.
It's probably still either the 50s or the very early 60s, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, those cars are definitely, 50s era cars.
Yeah.
Um, so so what I don't know is, so let's say it's probably a rubber membrane. What I don't know is, did they put crushed stone on top of it? Now it's a pitched roof.
Yeah, it is.
So my instinct says that there aren't stones up there. But
It's usually when you have a border around it and it's designed to
yeah,
pull. Yeah.
but also, I see patches where it looks like, there's no stones around those vents on the edges. So I honestly don't know. What I think the color is probably a
Light
less
gray.
than medium shade of gray, with maybe a little tan mixed in to warm it up.
Yeah.
That's what this tells me. And I'm obviously, just like you, I'm interpreting a black and white photograph, but
Sure. Now, notice how in this photo, it's early enough that it's got all of these windows cut in all the way along the whole thing.
yep.
Now, let me show you the next photos that would indicate something a little bit different. So here it is in MK days.
Hmm.
Is that office building? However, I don't believe Morris and Knudsen put this up. I just don't see this building. This looks just as weathered as the rest of the structure almost.
Yep.
So I'm thinking that Foster Wheeler put this up at some point, got rid of the lower offices that are in this section here. A lot of the new stuff has the, well, you saw how it says the green in the end and has some green here. But if you notice, I'm just going to try to zoom this a little bit. I have better photos of it, but you see how the windows are all boarded up?
Hmm.
They're literally boarded up with individual boards,
Yep.
which is striking. You'd think they would use plywood or something, right? I think there's a better view of it here. Like you can really see it here. See how clear that is?
Yeah. Well,
And see, this was a good picture that showed me this side of that elevator. It didn't show me the other side, which had that interesting detail to
yeah.
it. So my question to you, my other next question was going to be, I think I figured out how to do that, the boards, with some laser cut material,
Yep.
using some fencing. I think Bar Mills makes some. Naturally, I don't have enough. I got to glue it to cardboard. I got to shorten it and all that. My question to you is it worth talking about doing a laser run of this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah. I mean,
there's an
that's
enthusiastic, yeah.
no, I'm thinking as I'm speaking, which is
Okay.
unusual. Um,
And the
yeah.
caveat would be, can I get it without it costing $1 million and take it
Oh, yeah.
forever?
Yeah. We'll take care of that.
Like, do you think I could get it in February?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
And all you need are dimensions.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably what those are, Mike, is boards from stripped down pallets.
They're pretty wide though, aren't they?
It's hard to tell.
Well, look at
How
the
well,
locomotives down below. I mean, it looks like each board is almost the width of a cab window. Those look like wide boards.
well, if that's the case, maybe it's plywood that's been stripped down.
When I zoom it, I'm gonna do that. Go up. That doesn't look like plywood to me.
Yeah, no, it doesn't to me either. Um, well, you know why they did that.
I don't.
So when they built the building, uh, the types of lighting that was available to them for interior lighting wasn't that good.
Right.
So they needed to bring in outside light. But the big problem with outside light is it casts shadows. So as lighting improved, they didn't need those windows anymore, and they were better off without them.
Gotcha. They're probably
So they,
losing some heat through that too, no doubt.
well, I would imagine the cost to heat a building like that is not cheap.
I'm thinking that building in the winter wasn't the most pleasant place to work.
It was probably, 52 degrees tops.
A lot of welding going on inside because they made a lot of well, I can actually show you a picture too of that. So here, here's the kind of things that they would make. I mean, see the
Yep.
little guy down here in the multi-truck flat car, and that's
Oh
the
yeah.
interior of the building. They would at some point they would stand them up and do vertical welding too.
Jeez.
I know, incredible, incredible. Back when we actually made things. Um, there's one being constructed vertically and some welding actually happening. Actually, no, that's just glare. But you see what I'm talking about here. And they would
Yep.
literally take these things, lay them down, put them on a flat car, run them out to an X-ray building. In fact, I have this is the Superfund site map of the whole area, but there's a
Now, is
building,
that picture copyrighted?
you think? But you can see where here's here's where the track goes into the building, I think, or is that here? No, that's here. And this is the so-called crane yard. There'll be an overhead outside crane there. But down over here, just out of the print, there's an X-ray building, which I'm going to model. And they would literally trundle this thing into the X-ray building to X-ray it, and then haul it back into the plant for final finishing.
Gotcha.
They don't have all of the, okay. So here's here's one of my early mock-ups. Too tall, too big, decided not to model this little add-on thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Got a lot of feedback from people. And there's this picture here is, that's too similar to that one. So this picture here was in a magazine. Sam Scanella took a picture of this, and it was in, I think, Railpace. He was kind enough to send me another view that he shot. This picture was very useful to me because I was able to take the loco and use known dimensions on it to scale. Even though the photo skewed, I just kind of chose, a point on it that was in line with it, and was able to scale most of the dimensions pretty faithfully from it.
Uh-huh.
Interestingly enough, you see this panel here.
Yes.
In other photos, it's green, and I ended up doing mine that way. So clearly, lots of different things going on with this building. Here's a picture of the inside in Morrison Knudsen days.
Boy.
So you're probably right about the metal pan ceiling. That's typically what you see across this lattice girder, right?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, you can see in that photo, those are halogen bulbs. There's a million of them.
Right.
They're throwing a little heat. They're throwing a lot of light. Life is better under those lights than
Oh
they
yeah,
were.
this is much later, obviously.
Yep.
Much later. I wanted to show you the picture that other guy sent me, but it's in another folder. So let's see, maybe it's here. So here's an example of how I work. I'm trying to get a feel for how I'm going to do this, get the layout. And this is all built with plywood, as you can see.
Yep.
And I'm just trying to mock up and see how I'm going to do the lines on the siding. So this is scribed siding. I'm sorry, not scribed. This is evergreen 030 siding.
Mhm.
But in order to I didn't want to overlap it per se, because if you're doing that, maybe I can see it in this photo. Yeah. Can you see, if you look at this right here, it's like up on this side?
Yes.
I ran an 015 strip down the back of each strip and used it to give it a little bit of relief so that this looks like it's tucked under it, but it's not.
Right. So it almost has a look of clapboard.
Almost like, yeah, exactly. But they're individual strips just laid on there.
Uh-huh.
And you can see how much interior bracing is. I did all the interior bracing with vertical grain fur to get stuff that just wouldn't warp on me. So it's very, very heavily braced inside. I don't think it's going anywhere. But all of that siding is attached to the plywood with canopy glue.
Well, so when you're working that large, and I'm finding the same things, you have to work with different materials than we normally work with in this hobby. And you've got to be able to suspend this idea that the traditional materials are universally going to work, regardless of the size of the model.
Right.
Tried to build the core of that building out of basswood, 16th inch basswood, or anything similar. It would warp. You would never have a straight line.
Right. I was thinking the same thing with plastic, really, because if you're trying to build it out of plastic and not have it warp on
Yeah,
a building of that size. So
yeah,
I just thought it would be easier to build a very strong wooden core and just skin it with plastic. That's why I call it a hybrid.
yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
So you can see in this photo, I've added on that extra little thingy, and I've already put a skinned roof that covers this section and this section. So it's time to start thinking about coloring it, and the trim along the edges is critical. It'll be done like it is in the photos. So this is something you'll kind of see from the aisle, like where if you're standing in the spot where the swing bridge is, and you open it up and you're standing right there, which is what you do during an op session. This is the view you'd have of that side of the building. From the aisle, you're going to see the big plain side, which is, I'm sure I must have a view of the big plain side. You would think I would. Maybe I don't.
Huh.
Well, not in this particular, oh, here we go. There's the big plain side.
Yep.
So I'm really looking forward to doing all those little vertical marks on this side. I've been doing almost anything to put off doing that. It's actually not bad once you get doing it, but it's kind of busy work. So I'm just going to do a side at a time. And I've also been biding my time because really the next thing, because this end is already done. So the next thing you would logically do is the other end, but I still have yet to see a modern era photo of that end. And I just know the minute I'm done with it, one of those photos is going to crop up. You know what I mean? So there's like 3 different guys who have worked at MK that I've gotten information from and photos from, and I'm just waiting for one of them to pop up. Oh, is this the view you were looking for? So I'm not rushing that end. I think the next thing I'm going to do will be the long side.
There's nothing worse than information after the fact.
Oh, I know. Like there's a golden moment. So, but as you can see, I've got plenty to do here. I've got a blasting booth to do here. That was the other question actually that I had for you. So let me see real quick here in real time if I can locate this without boring everybody to death, because I wanted your opinion on that too.
While you're looking at that, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
So
Please.
I noticed in that last photo, I tend to look around the room,
Yep.
in the photo. You had a little bottle of MSP acrylic paint.
Yeah, that was something you recommended, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I wasn't sure. As I get older, the memory is going straight to hell.
Yeah.
Um,
It just
but
happened to be the right green. I have no idea
well,
why.
there's a million colors.
Right. But why do I have the right green? I
Because
just don't understand it.
yeah, yeah.
Like, why did I
Uh,
order that color? I must have had something in mind.
I probably have 90% of the paint that they produce.
I'm positive you turned me on to that.
I may have, yeah. I don't remember, but I'll take credit for it.
But you had a question?
Yeah, how do you like it?
I loved it. I was able to I was able to dry brush it very nicely. And
Yeah,
that's the effect that I was trying to get on that particular siding.
yep.
Boy, I'm just not finding that other picture, which is really a shame. But a little rehearsal would have probably gone a long way here. You think all these pictures would be right here, but they're not.
Oh,
Um, Jeez. Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, here
please.
it is. I just found it. Okay. So this was an amazing picture. I don't know if this is like the first, uh, just by way of background, in the very early 90s, Southern Pacific ordered 99 SD40M-2 rebuilds from Morrison Knudsen. And MK scoured the country for cores to build all of these locomotive rebuilds out of. And they were built out of SD40s. They were built out of SDP 45s. They were built out of SD 45s. So the car
Oh,
body
jeez.
itself, they're basically three different models. And I did an
Yeah.
article in RMC back in the day. They took one SD 45 and used the radiator section from a Mark rebuild that they were using. I mean, it was just nuts what they were doing in there. Pure kit bashing. I suspect this is either the first or the last one that they did.
I would think so. Yeah.
And but what's interesting on this photo, so you can see that little jut out thingy, right?
Yep.
I chose not to put this awning in. It looked like it would be too much of a pain in the neck. And I chose not to try to chisel in these windows into an already done section on the side of my building. I just thought asking for trouble.
Yeah, after the fact is hard.
Yeah. But you can see what I mean about the trim. So you might have noticed a thick piece of plastic on top of the little tower. So that's going to look
Yes.
like that. And this is how I'm going to trim it out. Ladder safety cage, the ubiquitous wood boarded up here. But let me just zoom this in a little bit and then go up a little bit. So now you look at this thing right here, which to me is very interesting. So it's not on top of this low roof. It's
Yeah.
in front. It's no deeper than this.
Yep.
And the guy tells me it's a blasting booth, a grit blasting booth.
Okay. I would have said, it's either that or the ventilation for a paint booth.
Well, there might be more than one thing going on here, but
Yeah.
the more I looked at it, the more I said, okay, this is an air conditioner on top of their cab.
Yep.
But you see this little space here?
Yeah.
Little, so that, I think that's this siding showing through. And I
Okay.
think maybe this is a leg. And I think
Oh,
maybe this booth is sloped down and that the grit blast medium maybe is in here.
so it's like a hopper.
Right, right. And I'm
Interesting.
basing that entirely on this little space right here.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
might be talking myself into it or not. What do you think? Because I was getting ready to build this as a vertical thing, not knowing what else it looked like. I'm unlikely to get
So,
a better photo of it until I build it. So
so a couple of questions. Does the building still exist?
no, smudge in the
Oh,
landscape.
okay. So one of the problems that we run into when we're doing historical recreations, and that's what this building
Right.
is you're limited by the amount of information that you can gather, and hopefully most of that information is photographic.
Yep.
Um,
Been a very interesting process and surprised me how difficult it was to get some of the other photos that I needed.
yeah. So here's what it comes down to. At the end of the day, there are sections that you're just going to have to make a best educated guess
Right.
based on your intellectual capital. And there may be someone out there, this guy right here, that you run into and he says, no, that's not what that looked like. And, you hit him over the head with an aluminum baseball bat, and then you don't have to worry about him bringing it up again.
Delete that comment from the group.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I
There's a
it,
speak
it,
now or forever hold your peace moment on a lot of this stuff, right?
we we spend hours and hours and hours gathering information, poring over it, interpreting it, um, turning it into CAD, turning it into a model, and it's all based on the best work that we can do given the information that we have.
Right.
And I know you're a perfectionist. I am too, and I'll talk about where that came into play in my project. You can only do what is, the best you can.
Right.
Um, at the end of the day, you're, short of holding the NMRA title, you are a master builder, you're a master modeler. There are, I don't know, I suppose there's a few modelers on the planet that can do what you do, but not many. Um,
Bet there's more than you think, but it's not
so
hundreds of thousands probably.
no, Michael, it really isn't.
Hmm.
Uh, so you got to rest easy knowing that you did everything you could do.
Well, basically, I'm not so much building it as to try to be as faithful as possible because I only think this was there in Foster Wheeler days. I'll never know that, you know. I
Mhm.
want to build it because it's cool and adds interest.
Yep. Yep.
So, what do you think I'm coming to the right conclusion about that being a hopper?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's sloped.
Yep.
I think if we could get the locomotive, get the people off the locomotive
Move
and
the
move
stupid
that this
engine.
way,
Yep.
I think that thing goes like this
Yeah.
underneath.
And it's
And
probably on some legs. The
yeah, I
bottom
think that's
doesn't touch the
the more I
ground.
look at it, the more I agree with you that that green that you see looks exactly like the green of the siding.
Right. And if the air conditioner on the cab wasn't in the way, you'd probably see that space. You'd see
Yep.
some of the slope sheet, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's how I'm going to build it. Heck with it. And
Yeah.
the ducting won't be exactly like that, but it'll be enough like that that I'll be satisfied with it.
Well,
It kind of looks like the side is silvery, but this is rusty, doesn't it?
I think it's just oxide red. I don't think it's rusted.
Well, this looks rusted, the ducting. I was just going to
Maybe,
paint it with camo brown.
if you had the ability to draw it in 3D, we bought a 3D printer a few weeks ago.
Well, the
And
CAD aspect is the thing, you know.
my buddy Sam, you should see the stuff he's pulling out of that.
I can just imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why Matt and Alec Herman are so busy because apparently at this point they've exponentially increased their abilities and they're just going night and day down there. They're like a mini Shapeways, like Shapeways never really got to be. The stuff that they're producing. I'm pretty sure I'm probably speaking out of turn here, but I don't know if you saw the announcement for the Erie Dunmore caboose that's being offered. It's going to be 3D printed. Did you see that?
Yes.
And I've been talking with the JL, I think it's JLL Design or something like. I've been talking with them for years about reissuing the Dunmore caboose because I've got like a kit bashed one and it's sort of okay, but it's not wonderful. And
Yep.
they told me they're going to do one in Pocono Northeast, so um, I can wait, but I definitely want one. So I'll be
Yep.
$120 Pocono Northeast caboose.
It's short money for the prototype.
Exactly. And then,
Yep.
I mean, they only had one. Why not do it right? I've
Sure.
done their entire fleet of motor power, so uh, all three of them. So why not do the caboose?
Yep. Yep.
So
Agreed.
all right, so you concur on that. So this is all good news. So and you've probably seen the latest photos on it. So it's definitely going to be a feature at some point. So there's probably no point in going any further with this. I guess I
Yep.
could just show uh, the use of some grout. This is one of the
Yeah,
things.
I wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Okay,
Um,
so there's two
I,
kinds of grout here. That's
well,
actually
I was fascinated at the fact that there were two different types of grout. And I'm currently kind of struggling to figure out what I want to use as I start the scenery for this exhibit. And
yep.
there's a lot of dirt, roadways. There's not a lot of green around these buildings, but there's a lot of dirt. And they even though I went to the trouble of cultivating the dirt, from the actual site, when you bring it inside under indoor lighting, it doesn't look the same.
Really? So you're not happy with the dirt?
I'm not
It's
real happy with the dirt.
and now it's fully dry at this point?
Oh, it's been dry for a couple of years.
Okay. Okay. So let me tell you why I did what I did here.
Yep.
The roadway section, this long section, and this sort of cross track section down here is what I call confalone grout. He literally came down, told me what bags to get. And went in
Okay.
the workshop and we put the dust collecting system on. Because it's like making a cake with Mike's mixing grout. And
Oh, I can
he
imagine.
mixed me up a big tub of it, like, maybe that wide and as deep. And I just
Yep.
looked at that and I thought, good God, that's several lifetimes worth of grout. And believe it or not, I know it's got to be 5, 6 years, maybe at least. Um, I'm getting down pretty low on it.
So you pre-mix it and it doesn't harden?
Powdered grout, right? You mix it up. It's in like a big, those heavy duty Tupperware bins. So it's not
Yeah.
like really airtight. I don't have a damp basement, which I'm sure
Yeah.
helps. Um, but yeah, no, it just stays powdery. And I have a little scoop and I just sprinkle it out and I brush it into place. And then another Confalon secret is I take a wallpaper seam roller and I
Yeah.
roll it. So I roll it, pretty dense and pretty flat. And then
Hmm.
I just take 50/50 alcohol water misting and just soak it right down and walk away. Now, next day or much later in the day when it's really thoroughly dry, it's pretty solid. If it was in an area that I thought might get some physical damage, I might saturate it with a 50/50 glue water mix after a little more alcohol misting. But I've only done that in a couple of places. Most places I haven't done that at all. And then the final secret is you just kind of dust it with a little bit more grout and brush it in, but don't mist it. And it ends up looking like that. I mean, to me, it's a very convincing, dirt gravel road kind of a look. Um,
Sure is.
Ever since I've started using it, it's kind of changed everything. Trying to find an area that's in focus. That's about as good as it gets. So I mean, you've got a little bit potholey action. You see how there's some coarse ones in
Yeah.
there, and then some fine from driving over it. If you wanted to, put a few weeds here and there, or even maybe a little highlighting of drips from trucks with a little bit of pan pastels or oils, you can do a lot with it. So I thought, why don't I continue to do that here? Now, what I did here is a little bit different because normally I think of what's going on in here as paving. But you can even see it's still wet here. I must have taken this
Yeah.
right after misting. No, I do all my asphalt paving with lightweight spackle mixed with powdered uh, uh, paint pigment. Kind of looks like laser printer toner for all practical purposes. It's a very fine black powder. I can mix a
Yep.
bunch of that in to get whatever shade I want. The lightweight spackle is relatively inexpensive, although getting more expensive like everything, and very forgiving and very easy to work with. So I love doing that for asphalt paving. For concrete areas, it's good for that too, but you use a ton of rather expensive weathering powders to mix into it, So I
Yeah.
wanted to try something different. And I actually used some of this pre-mixed grout a little while ago to do a small repair in the bathroom. And in working with it, I thought, So I had bought the gray, and at the Home Depot, I saw that they had a tan. So basically, I just took the gray and the tan and mixed it 50/50 and just putty knifed it right into place here. And then used the NMRA gauge to cut the flangeways while it was wet.
Uh-huh.
And the finished product, it's pretty good looking concrete. Like it's not quite as smooth as you might want if you were representing brand new, freshly laid concrete, but how often are we modeling that really,
Right.
This looks like concrete that's been around for a while. And I mean, I just used whatever spray paint I had around to paint the white styrene. Most of this that you see, you're only going to see like this portion of it a little bit through the doors. So I wasn't going crazy about matching it. I'll weather this area that you can see through the doors and you'll never know the difference. But I was surprised at how easy it was to get a color match to the spray paint that I used on the styrene. The only thing I would say is it sets up a little faster than you think. So I would do one of these tracks at a time next time.
Yeah.
if I were doing it. But it also makes for a very, very structurally sound product when you're done. So, you know, you're not going to chip it. It's not going to bubble up on you or anything. You know what I mean? This is, I think, some kind of acrylic binder in it for the premixed
Yep.
grout. So, I think I think it's got its uses. And, you know, maybe I would want to do a concrete base under a generator or something, or transformer, right? I might consider just framing up something with some styrene strips, trowel it in there and smooth it out and walk away. And then there's your pad, you know?
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think I'm gonna experiment with it a little more. God knows I got enough of it. So I've got enough to, you know, do lots and lots of slabs. But I would
Yeah.
encourage you to look at grout for your, you know, your non-paved roadways, because
Well, it really caught my eye when you came out with it because I don't remember you ever using it or talking about it before. So that struck me.
maybe I didn't
Uh,
talk about it before, but I've used it for years now.
okay.
And in fact, have gone over old areas with it that I had made like a feeble attempt, but wasn't happy with it. You know, the minute I started using this, I think the first time I used it was in Tunkhannock. That's how long ago.
Yep.
That's like pre-edition.
So you were holding back on the rest of us. That's great, Mike. Thanks.
It's just grout. I'll bet I talked about it.
Well, I know I've heard of other modelers using it.
Maybe it was on a better podcast. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, might have, very well might have been. Um, you know, I watch a lot of YouTube videos from military modelers because I'm trying to find techniques that we don't normally use and adopt them. And there's one guy, he's out of Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic. And this guy is incredible. And what he does, it really blows me away, is he airbrushes, he'll build a diorama and he airbrushes everything on the base of that diorama black.
That's
And
his
then
starting point.
that's his starting point. So his
It's like the opposite of what we would do. We would paint everything and then maybe do a wash to get
no,
black in the
so
crevices.
we would consider it finished. So he puts down his static grass, he puts down any ground foam, any dirt, mud effects, and then he goes over the whole thing and paints it black.
He
And
paints the static grass black?
yeah, and are you still sharing your screen, by the way?
No, I don't think so. I think I have us back.
Okay. Um,
I think.
and
We'll
when you
find
see
out.
him do this, and I'll send you a link. When you see him do this, you go, huh? What, what this guy, he has no idea what he's doing. Nobody does that. Why would you put down static grass that's already colored and then spray paint it black?
Because he
And when
wants dark roots and
like he will, yeah, so he will put down like a dirt road. And I would look at it and say, okay, it's dirt, it's a road, it looks good.
right.
And then he spray paints it whatever and then he'll paint little individual rocks. And it's such a step up from what I don't think what we do is crude by any stretch of the imagination, but it's certainly a broader brush approach to modeling
Well, it's pure
than some of
art
these
when you think
military
about it,
models.
right?
I'm sorry?
It's pure art when you think about it.
It's way beyond what I'm used to doing, but
And I
I'm
can't
gonna try
imagine
to.
that scaling on a large layout. Like it looks like diorama stuff. Sounds like.
Well, deep to me, good detail is good detail, and if we can take
Yes.
a couple of these
Can you
techniques.
imagine me airbrushing my layout? Like
Oh, but I'll tell you what,
I'd have black
I
lung.
would definitely consider running an airbrush over maybe not the static grass, but the dirt roads to get the right coloring. I've always struggled with getting a color that I was really happy with.
Well, I mean, you laugh, but Confalone dyes his own static grass because he can't get a color he likes. I know that
Well,
shocks you.
there's nothing that you could tell me that Mike does or did that would surprise me.
You heard about the AGR, there's no more Allagash, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, right after, right before the article appears in Railroad Model Craftsman, he
Right.
announces that he's changing the name of the railroad.
I just did
He
like,
could have waited a month until after
no.
the article was
Oh
out.
no, he woke up one day and said, "This is it." That's how he rolls. That's how he rolls. I just did like 10 engines for him.
Yeah, unbelievable.
He used to say no six-wheel power on my layout. Now it's like mostly six-wheel power, six-axle power.
So, in terms of Foster Wheeler, you've always got a pretty good handle. I'm sorry. I thought I was. Oh, you know what? That's my computer. That's not my phone. My phone
I
is.
heard nothing. You could have
Oh,
just
good.
nailed right through that.
Perfect. Okay.
We'll edit that.
So,
I'll get Joe Duckworth to edit it for me.
yeah, perfect. Uh, you have a great handle on process and timeline. What's the timeline for having this complete?
It's the funny thing is, not more than a week ago, I looked at this thing and I thought, it's going to take a minute
Yeah.
because it deserves to be done right. And I'm enjoying it, so why rush it? And it is true that with the siding treatment that I'm using, you get better at it as you do it. Like it goes,
Mhm.
it goes better. And it's just a mindset of this afternoon, I'm going to do an hour of that and then, see where I'm at. But you look at the, all of the minor detailing that still needs to be done on the building. I've got to build all kinds of doors and garage doors. And, I mean, I would say minimum of at least a month more worth of work of just on that.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me, even at the speed in which you work.
Yeah. It's just a lot to do. It's a big project. And
Well,
it's going to, I'm telling you right now, it's going to bleed right into the next, not quite as big, but still big project, which is Certainteed, which is their sort of their next door neighbor. And Certainteed is a much more complex but smaller structure, but it's got silos and tracks below the silos and loading docks and very cool building that I think I mentioned on one of the podcasts in the past that I've got great photos of it because it's not in business anymore there, but it's like
mhm.
perfectly preserved. It's like a mothballed roofing shingle plant. Everything that was there is still there, perfectly preserved, just no humans and no trucks. So I'm probably going to move right along on that because it's exactly right next to this. The property kind of ties into it, and you wouldn't want one, you know, bare naked scene next to a finished scene. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
how this Foster Wheeler scene tails off is as yet undetermined, and a lot of it's going to depend on what Certainteed needs. You know what I mean? So chances are very strong I'm just going to move right into that.
Understood. Understood.
At
Well,
that point, I've only got one more thing to do in Crestwood. There's a plastics facility there, which will be relatively straightforward to do. Some silos, generic metal building, kind of a piece of cake to do. So it makes sense to kind of stay on Crestwood. Probably by, the fall, Crestwood will be just done. And the winter project will be, grandchildren and the Pocono Northeast.
do you, and I may have asked you this before, do you ever wake up in the morning and say, I just don't feel like doing this today?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Not many times,
Yeah,
it is what I like to do, but more often yeah, I call it staring at it time. Like, I've said a million times, I have to have it in my head and then I can build it. But a lot of
sure.
times you're just standing there going, "Mm, not seeing it,
Yep.
not seeing it. I'm going for a walk." You think about it and you walk. It's a process, you're trying to figure something out. How are you going to do it? How's it going to look? and I can tell I'm getting close. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I've been dreaming about it. It's like a sickness. You know,
Yeah.
you're thinking about it, falling asleep. Sometimes I solve a problem
Oh,
during sleep.
yeah, we've talked about that. We've both done that where, you're so focused on how to overcome this issue and the solution comes during sleep.
Yeah, it's borderline obsession, but not in the
Well,
I'm
but
missing meals and family gatherings way. You know, I
right, exactly.
can still pass in general society, kind of
It's benign, right? I
right,
mean,
harmless,
no baby seals are getting clubbed over the head.
right? But
So,
the moment you figure it out, that's what you live for. Right now, it's like, of course, a child could do it, and you just plunge into it, and those now you're in the flow. Now you're just
yeah,
going, you know.
yeah.
And basically everything I've ever done is like that, really.
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing the finished product. It's I find your work amazing. It's so well thought out.
Well,
And
there's
I
fun.
think one of the benefits we have as prototype modelers is we don't have that problem of, well, this going to look right? Is this going to fit in next to this? Um,
Well,
because if this was next to that, it automatically fits.
doesn't mean you have to model it though.
It doesn't
So
mean you have to
so
model it
there's
now.
there's times where I've wanted to do something bad, and the more I look at it, I realize that's gonna look like crap there.
Yeah.
It's just I don't have the space to do it the way I want to do it. So
Yep.
you make that selective compression, right? I mean, that's kind of like, what we do. Not just to segue into your project. I mean, there's zero selective compression in your building, which
That
is
doesn't exist in my world.
it's kind of
Uh,
unprecedented, really. Like, who does that?
well, it's easier to do if you're not building a model railroad, if you're not constrained by, bench work
Basement.
first.
Yeah.
I design the buildings and then design the bench work under it, which is a luxury, but these are dioramas.
Yeah, it's the opposite of what we do, right? I mean, when I design a new area, I'm planning for how do I get the most bench work and still move people through here? And now what can I build there?
Now, I am constrained by the reality that I have to fit it into the double doors of the museum.
Sure. Or
So
into a truck.
or into a truck, which is actually less of a concern because the town owns some pretty big trucks.
Yeah.
But the
Do you want them moving it in a dump truck though? I mean, really.
well, these are in very heavily padded crates,
Right.
uh, or caskets, as I call them. But with the first diorama, there was some selective compression in terms of the length of it. But the
Well,
buildings
what's
were
your
all
ruling dimension? 6 feet? Is that the doorway?
no, less than. I think it's 68 inches is the width of the doorway.
Okay.
Uh so width
But you're not
isn't
compressing the building. You're just doing less of the surroundings, right?
correct. So in this case, with this diorama, this is, we talked about the point of critical mass. This is the point of critical mass with regards to the railroad in Franklin. In that it's the divergence of rail lines. The Milford branch of the Midland Division branches off to the right. The Midland Division main line continues straight, and there were 3 tracks that went off to the right for the Milford branch. There were 7 tracks that went straight for the Midland Division main line, and I could only get 6 of the 7 tracks,
Right. And you
and
know who's going to miss that seventh track?
it hurt badly.
Nobody.
Yeah, well, no, and the thing of it is that in my world, 98% of everybody that's going to see this exhibit doesn't know that anyway.
Right. But you would have
So
liked to have that seventh track in there.
I would have loved to have had it. That track actually was it ended up branching off about a half a mile down the main line and became the Providence branch of the Midland Division.
Did you ever consider an add-on once it's in the building?
Well, I actually did, and it came down to what the value of that would be
Right.
versus the headache
Yep.
associated with it.
Yep.
And
At least it
it
doesn't
just,
have to operate. Like you could
yeah, there was
have
no
something that
payoff.
clicked on with magnets,
Yeah.
sprinkle a little stuff in the groove, you're done.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of return on investment to do that though.
Right.
And so, I've got to weigh a couple of things. One is, not the least of which, is the time in modeling. So, I've been working on this. My buddy Sam and I have been working on this for 14 months now.
Now, I should point out that you have been either heroically or stupidly working on this thing in an unheated garage in the winter, right?
Uh, Basically, yes. I
Is there
have,
any heat out there?
yes,
Not the dog.
yeah. Um, I have a tiny space heater
Yeah.
that basically takes the chill
You put it between your feet.
out of the air. No, what I do is I open the door between the garage and the basement, and the basement is heated.
Okay.
So I get a little heat in that way. And then with the heater in there, it's workable. It's not there was a point a couple of weeks ago where it was down to like 44 in
Yeah.
there.
If you can see your
Uh,
breath, that's not good.
and that was a little tough. My greater concern was as I'm starting scenery, how do the adhesives and scenery products work with the temperature in there?
Paint too. Yeah.
Paint, yeah, and I can attest that I ballasted some track the other day, and it took a good long time for the glue to dry,
I'll bet.
the matte medium. So I'm concerned about things like
So using
using
matte medium
sculpt.
instead of white glue.
Yes,
Interesting. Is that because
yeah,
it's flexible and you're moving it around and you just want a better bond?
I'm comfortable with it. I've always used it.
Yeah.
Um,
I've never tried
so
it actually. I mean, I've always used Elmer's glue 50/50, like, just
it,
a lot cheaper.
it doesn't really matter, honestly, Mike. Other than you're right, it is cheaper.
You do it 50/50?
Yes. Well, actually, the matte medium is a 4-to-1 water to matte medium ratio.
So it's kind of like what you'd use on super trees.
Yeah, so it's fairly economical when you mix it to that ratio.
Yep.
Um, but so I'm concerned about sculpt mold drying effectively, and I
Okay.
know in the past, for the past two dioramas, I know that the colder it is in there, the slower it dries, and
Sculptamold can be tricky. I've used Sculptamold in the depth of summer, and you know that I have central AC and
Mhm.
and a dehumidifier. But I have gone down the next day and looked at the Sculptamold and it's grown hair. It's got a mold thing. And
Yeah.
I just Lysol it and it's fine, but it's like, seriously? I almost wonder if the mold spores are in the Sculptamold.
Well, keep in mind that it is a paper-based product.
Right.
So, I think when that paper gets wet, whatever you've got airborne, is going to cultivate in the sculptor mold.
I went down
More,
there one time and I had carved like a little bit of, this was probably in the old layout, but I had applied it to a plywood piece that was the abutment. Remember the old removable bridge
yes,
in the old train room? So I painstakingly carved all of the stone blocks into the damp sculptor mold and came down at that night after supper and it had orange fuzz all over it and I just freaked out.
yeah, yeah.
Lysol killed it, but still, really?
I've got to pour some 2-part epoxy, and there's
How
no way.
much?
I'm sorry.
How much?
Less than we did for yours by far.
Wouldn't that
Uh,
apply to
it,
just
it,
about anything?
it's about I would say maybe an inch and a half wide sluiceway that is maybe 2 feet long.
Ah, that's not,
So, it's maybe a full red Solo cup full at the
yeah,
most.
yeah. But you
Uh,
gotta be careful with temperature on that.
well, it's there's no way it's gonna cure if it's 50 degrees in there.
You're just gonna have to wait.
So it'll be the last thing I do.
Yep,
I'm gonna get the warmest day outside. I'm gonna, crank that heater,
yeah.
and then I'll get it done. But just to get back to the selective compression part, no, I mean every building is within a millimeter
Now, you've
of
never done that before this project, right? Like for layout stuff. Is there anything you've been
no,
able to build
well,
exact
so you have to
size?
be careful, because if you're strictly scratch building prototype buildings, uh theoretically you can do it, but you're gonna, unless you're blessed with a basement the size of yours, you're gonna run out of space really, really quick.
I ran out
Uh,
of space.
yeah, well, yeah. Uh, so that's one issue, but then if mix buildings that are to scale with, say, craftsman structure kits,
Right.
you don't know what kind of selective compression, and it may not be a conscious decision that the kit manufacturer is even making, that they're using, and you can't put one next to another. So for instance, if you had a South River Model Works brick mill and you tried to put it next to a fine scale miniature wood mill, they would look completely bizarre next. They would look like they're different scales.
How so? Which one
So
is the
the
culprit?
the wood building. Bob Van Gelder used a lot of selective compression.
Yeah.
I think, and again,
Are you saying like his windows would be smaller? The size of his clapboard would be smaller?
just the overall building dimensions.
Okay.
So the mind, when we think of brick buildings, we think large.
Yep.
Brick mills, New England brick mills are large structures.
Sure.
Even the
Brand one.
smallest New England brick mills are big buildings.
Yeah.
Um, and we also equate wooden mills as being smaller. But when you put one next to the other and they're the same damn size, it causes a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yep.
work.
Yep.
So I've got the benefit of, because I'm working as close to scale as I can get, again, based on the photographic evidence that I have, the measurements that I've taken of the buildings that still exist, um, Google Earth, Sanborn maps, all of that information, and extrapolating that into 2D drawings. Um, I'm everything is equal. So the scale that I build this little wooden warehouse is the same scale I'm using for this brick mill.
Sure.
So when they're next to each other, they automatically look like they should be next to each other.
Well, you've taken a a very extreme amount of physical measurements. Like, weren't you down there measuring individual bricks?
Yeah. So, it took 4 months just to get all the measurements.
Like, imagine if this place didn't exist, and you're trying to
Oh,
build it from the 5 photos I have of Foster Wheeler. It's like,
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean there's no way that I could have recreated it if it didn't exist. Uh, without, just completely making it up.
yep,
So there's two mills really, and the second mill, which is Franklin Yarn, had back wooden clapboard warehouses that no longer are there, and I can kind of, through
burned
photographs, I can kind
down.
of see, well, they were torn down. They were replaced with utilitarian cinder block warehouses that in turn have been torn down. The photographs I have show bits and pieces of you know, corners and sides and roof lines and some doors here and there. And I can,
So the
you know, I
era
can,
that you're modeling has which version?
I'm sorry, say that again.
The era that you're modeling of this is which version of those structures?
1932.
That doesn't answer my question. In 1932,
Yep.
what of those structures was appropriate?
I'm sorry, I lost the last part.
In 1932,
Yes.
these buildings that went from wood to cinder block to whatever, then torn down. What are you modeling?
So they're all wood at
They're
this
all
point.
wood.
Yeah. Yeah. But and then again, this is where the character comes in, and this is one of the reasons why I chose 1932. Um, there were four buildings that were built one after the other and then attached to one another to make one long building, but they all have different roof lines. They all have, you know, there's no consistency to those four buildings.
Right.
So you know, they were purpose built. Uh, you know, that the mill owner certainly didn't care what they looked like.
Right.
It was function over form.
How much does it cost?
Right. How much does it cost? How fast can we have it done? Is it
Yep.
going to suit our purposes for this point in time? And it did. Um, but you know, had I done just a cinder block building of the same length, it wouldn't have any of the feel or character that
Boring. Yeah.
these four buildings. Um,
So the last time you posted photos on the
yes.
group, the thing looked pretty evolved. Like, you know, it didn't look undone, right? I mean, those windows, those stunning scratch built windows just make the building. So
Well,
I'm going to ask you the same question you asked me. Like, you said you have the stream to pour, but are the structures done? Like, is it just scenery at this point?
the structures are probably 90+% done.
Yeah,
There's a punch list.
always.
At one point, the punch list was over 80 items. Uh, but it's since been whittled down considerably, thankfully. You know, they're
You have a
details.
spreadsheet.
Yeah, yeah, they're building details
That's what I did when I
that,
built the addition. I had to. The punch
yeah,
list was like, wasn't
yeah,
just a punch list, it was like a task list. It was
yeah, no, absolutely.
200 lines or something.
It's project management.
Right, right.
And you know, you follow that same deal. So I'm at a point now where you know, instead of approaching it from a broad brush perspective, you know, I can pick up a building and say, all right, this needs exterior lights. Uh, you know, this needs a little more dry brushing. This needs some roof details, and
Functional
done.
lights, is it going to be
No,
something?
no, no,
No.
no. Oh God, no. I mean, just to do that for the 30 or so buildings that are on this diorama. The would have to bring in new service to the historical museum.
Wait a minute,
Um,
did you say 30?
yeah, I haven't done an exact. I'm starting to do a by the numbers kind of thing because you know, I think that that's an interesting fact about this
Are
thing.
you including all the previous dioramas?
No, no, no. Including just
This
this.
diorama is
Yeah,
30 buildings.
yeah. It's about 30 buildings. Yeah,
Wow.
I know. I know. There's a.
Yeah, that's okay. So it's
Uh,
really scratching an itch for you.
Yeah, no, I mean it's pure
30.
problem solving and scratch building. And so, you know, and I probably mentioned this in the fall when we recorded, but you know, if it wasn't for Sam Maxwell, who has partnered with me on this project would not have happened under any
No,
circumstances
you
that
wouldn't live long enough to scratch build all of that.
well, no, I mean, not even for, I mean, I'm doing all of the building. Sam is all doing all of the back room engineering of this thing. He has become the project engineer on this thing.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm giving him, I did the measurements. And literally I started off by measuring a brick. All right, this is the dimension of a brick in the old part of the mill. This is the dimension of the brick in the new part of the mill. I measured every window. I provided him with accurate measurements. I provided him with some kind of raw 2D CAD work.
Yep.
But he drew all of those windows. He figured out how to engineer them and cut them out of material that you wouldn't find in a Craftsman structure kit, because modelers would just destroy them, and you'd end up replacing them left and right. It's chipboard.
Yep.
Um, but he captured the layered effect of those windows. Those
Well, that's
windows
what
are
that's what struck me, the level of detailing, I mean, it's much finer than anything you'd see in an injection molded.
oh yeah,
Much more detailed.
yeah. Um,
And I could
he
tell that just from a distance. I can imagine when I see this in person, it's just gonna floor me.
he engineered the smokestacks. He engineered. There's actually it's kind of weird because these are brick. And in the case of Franklin Yarn, it's concrete and stucco mill. But Hayward Mills is a giant brick mill complex. It's for the time it was as utilitarian as architects would make it. They always took a little pride in their brickwork.
Yep. The kind of
The
detailing you don't never see anymore.
the mill office is a separate little house,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a gingerbread design. In the front, where there's a kind of a bay window, it actually has a curved wall. It's
Jeez.
a half round wall. And I looked at this thing and I said, how the hell are we going to do this?
Right.
And what kind of, pre 1960s LSD was the architect
Yep.
on when he decided this was a good idea? And on top of that, on this curved wall, there were scalloped shingles.
Right. This was a particular era. I can go through the West End of New Bedford and you see these little eyebrow windows with like a curved dormer over it. I'm not sure if that's even the correct term, but all kinds of details like that and curved walls like you're talking about instead of a 90-degree corner, and you just think, boy, that stuff is just long gone.
Well, Sam figured it out. And I didn't have to draw or anything. He drew it out. He's a really, really sophisticated CAD guy.
Yep. Was he always
Uh,
that guy, or is this a skill he
he was
picked up?
so I've known Sam for 30 years, and he started off being my mechanic. But shortly after I met him as my mechanic, we were talking about computers, and it turns out he could build a computer in his sleep.
It's one of
So
those guys.
he was building computers for me. He's just the kind of guy that if you show him something, his natural curiosity and his intelligence take over, and within a short amount of time, he figures out how to do it.
Yep.
So every problem that we've had with regards to this project, he's figured a solution to that allows me in such a way that I can build it. Um, the with so for instance, Jimmy Simmons, we love Jimmy Simmons and Monster Model Works, and Jimmy has been so innovative in this hobby.
He was
um,
actually an early leader in that, wasn't he?
he
Like
really was. Well,
he was doing it
nobody
when nobody was doing it.
nobody was laser scribing brick into basswood sheets
Right.
until he came along, and he not only did it, but he did it really, really well.
Yep.
The problem is when you're building something this big, you would go broke buying this material from him.
Right.
And I love him, and I want to support him, but to that extent, I can't. It'd be like having another child in college.
You have to be the manufacturer in order to make this sense.
So, so Sam said, measure the bricks, and I measured the bricks, and the next thing I knew, he had drawn out brick patterns, and so what he did was he did 3 files. The first file scribes an entire 6-inch by 24-inch sheet of basswood with basic new brick.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes an hour to do, by the way.
Yep.
And then the next layer distresses and weathers about 30% of those bricks.
Yep.
So it takes the uniformity out of it.
Okay.
There's a third layer that adds about another 30% of weathering on top of that, which we didn't use for this project, but it's there.
You
If
use
we
the
ever
middle
need.
one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And when you do that, and this is one of the reasons why I like wood, when you do that, when you laser cut bricks into wood, when you etch into wood, it changes the colors randomly of the
Mm,
wood because of the burning process.
yep.
So when you paint it, you get some transparency through the paint, and that those colors come through. So you
Yep.
automatically have darker bricks and lighter bricks. And then you go over it with other paints and do some highlighting, but you've already got a head start on that process.
Did you grout it with the usual spackle?
Yeah, I'm actually, it's funny, I still have the same container of Fast and Final that I bought when I did the paper mill for Dick Elwell.
Jeez.
And
Has it
yeah,
dried up?
no, no, little goes a long way.
Yeah.
And I've done, every brick building in these two mills with it, and I still have plenty left.
Jeez. Must have
So,
been a good sized container.
actually, it was,
Couldn't have been the little ones like this.
yeah, well, maybe the one bigger than that.
Yeah, probably that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, so, we've overcome a lot of obstacles. Um, it's moving forward. The original exhibit date was supposed to be last December 1st. And there was no
We
way
knew
I
you
was
weren't
gonna.
going to make that, and there was no point rushing it to try to make it.
There were just, too many. Well, part of it was we decided because of the proximity of this Franklin yarn mill that we should include it in the diorama.
Okay.
Uh, and then so we did the basic engineering and CAD work and problem solving, and it was a little bit of a different animal because it's a concrete and stucco building that's all window walls. So we had to figure out how we build that and keep it from turning into a pretzel
Never
because of
really
humidity.
seen that modeled. That's interesting.
Well, what we
How did you
did,
solve that problem?
so it's three layers of chipboard. So it's the layer that has the lower sash, window sash, the layer that has the upper window sash, and then the facade trim piece that goes over that. Now, the chipboard in and of itself in three layers it would just be destroyed.
Okay.
So what Sam figured out was if you took
Acrylic.
a 1/8 inch thick sheet of
I
acrylic,
remember this. Yes.
yeah, and laser cut it, and
Yep.
then make a sandwich of all these using canopy glue. And it's the layers were staggered so that you don't have to use corner pieces. It all just kind of fits together nicely.
Wow.
It ended up working well, and if you hold the picture of the prototype up against it, it's just, yeah, I don't take the credit for it because he engineered it, but he
When do
nailed
you
it.
when do you foresee this being on display?
So again, getting back to that, so then we moved it up to March 8th of this year,
Kind of
and
close.
it was quite possible that I could make that March 8th deadline. I had an epiphany. Talk about, waking up in the middle of the night. My concern, or what was eating at me about this, is that um, there is no written collateral information to accompany these dioramas.
Mm,
And even though the vast majority of the people who are viewing them are from Franklin, they still don't know necessarily what they're looking at or what
right.
specific buildings are.
I mean, any museum would have some
Exactly.
write up on it, right? And this is basically a
So
museum piece.
yeah, so I called the chairman and I said, hey, let me run this by you. I said, March 8th is coming up. I said, I can have the diorama done, I think, but I don't think we're doing it any service by putting all three of these dioramas on display for 2 months and not having information that people can read as they're looking at this thing that explains what the hell they're looking at. Now, in the past 2 years, I've kind of, every weekend for 6 hours, I've done this stand and deliver thing where, I've been able to explain to the 60 or so people that come in each day what it is they're looking at. There is no way I can do that with this third diorama. There's just too
No,
much to it.
you
Complex.
need AI, Scott.
And honestly, Mike, people wouldn't have the appreciation for what went into this. Now, Sam and I together have over 2,000 hours into this. And there's probably another 300 or 400, to get it done.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
so getting it done, that I actually thought of another question during that I didn't want to interrupt you on. Once this diorama is complete, is that is that it? Is there another one after that?
well, certainly not to this extent. And that's kind of the discussion. When we have these three dioramas on display, they're going to take up all of the open display area that we have in the museum.
Yep.
There is a kind of a Broadway that goes down the center of the museum that we use for presentations and exhibits, and it'll be full with the three. So um, it will be the last stand up on legs um, diorama that I can do, but that's not to say that I couldn't do maybe some smaller tabletop type pieces.
Yep.
There's kind of an in
A better
between.
question might be, what do you want to do?
And that's the thing too. What I
Because you're
want to
enjoying
do,
it, obviously. I mean, yeah,
I'm enjoying it,
that's your
but
roots. You got back to it. I mean, you got to be enjoying it.
I'm enjoying it, but I have to say that I didn't totally understand what building this would take. It felt like every time I looked at the Sanborn maps, I found another building.
Right.
And the yes, I'm enjoying it. The trade-off is it's time away from family. It's
Baseball season's coming up.
baseball season, demands of work.
Right.
Uh, I like spending time with Tina and the kids. I don't want to, sacrifice that.
But the
But
definition of a full life is to be well-rounded and have interests and not just be doing one thing, right?
without question, without question.
These things interesting.
So
I never
as
would
much
have guessed I'd have like multiple grandchildren. Like, what would that be like? And
right, exactly.
what would it be like to have to travel all over the place to see him? And it just
And that's
didn't know what I didn't know.
that's in our future,
No, it's my present.
well, it's your present and
Yeah,
my future. We spend time every year, traveling to see the kids in school,
right. Basically
traveling to
just doesn't
see my
stop.
oldest. I'm sorry.
It just doesn't stop. You're never done being a parent. You're never
Yep.
done being a grandparent. There's only one way you finish.
Yep. So to answer your question, what do I want? I want to. I'm looking forward to being done with this. I'm happy with it to this point, which I'm usually not. I usually don't like it until it's done. I also don't particularly like showing works in progress.
Yeah, I noticed
Uh,
that. It was very courageous of you to put that out there.
yeah, because I
Uncle
feel
On's
like
like that too. That's basically all I do.
yeah, and some people are comfortable with it, some people aren't. I'm not as comfortable with it. I'm looking forward
You
to
know
it
why
being
I do
done.
that in part? Um, I find that it keeps me disciplined with the documentation of the project for a future article.
Yep. There are parts of this too that kind of go on behind the scenes, like the curating of rolling stock and locomotives for it.
I wanted to ask you that. So there will be rolling stock and at least a locomotive on it.
Uh, yeah. I've got a stash of 1932 appropriate rolling stock and passenger cars that incorporated into all three dioramas. Um, I had some smaller New Haven locomotives that were typical of the local freights that ran around the area.
Yeah,
Uh, but in this diorama, I wanted to show some bigger stuff. So
it's all
uh,
steam, right?
yeah, so I found a New Haven 282. I found a New Haven Mountain, and I found the New Haven Pacific. Um, so
All brass, I assume, right?
no, actually, one of the pieces was BLI.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The other was, a quasi prototypical Spectrum, and then there was a piece of brass in there.
Yeah.
Uh, Bob Leonard has been gracious and responsible for the weathering of those pieces. They just brought one back to me today. It looks fantastic. Um,
But the thing will
so
be unpowered, right? No power to the rails.
yeah, no power. It is a static diorama. Thank God.
No,
'Cause
no sound decoder with steam sounds and underneath the layer, underneath the diorama.
no, although the BLI is DCC. Um, but unless you have some kind of steam fan trip on your layout, I don't know where it would run.
Very
Uh,
unlikely. I
yeah,
did
very unlikely. No, I
I,
understand
I
that.
did run a customer's brass John Henry that I did a sound install on the layout at his request because he just wanted to see it in its native territory there. So
Yeah,
it looked weird to me.
yeah. So I'm exploring different scenery options. The search for appropriate pine trees has kind of been the bane of my existence a little
Yeah,
bit.
it's everybody's problem.
I found some. I'm actually waiting for them on Etsy.
Really?
Uh, yeah, and the pictures look good. We'll see what they look like when they actually get here. I ordered a couple of others
Yeah. If you
from
like
Etsy, and
them,
I got them.
I'd have some interest because
Yeah,
it's everybody's
um,
problem, that unless you're going to sit there and hand build them one at a time,
can't do that.
anybody
Uh,
can hand build a tree.
yeah, I've got to pick my battles.
Right.
I'm very lucky that I do have some people that are helping me. Bob Leonard being one. I don't consider Sam a helper; he's a partner in this. But um, Carl Ozolinski out in Michigan has painted figures and vehicles for me, and
Huh.
just offered me a whole bunch of figures. But just curating the figures has been a challenge because the prize of figures are just um, if I were doing one
Okay.
diorama in my life, Prizer would be fine. But to do the same, figure with the guy holding up, I don't know, he's got like an oven mitt on his hand. I don't know what the hell it is, or catcher's mitt or something. And the other guy who's doing this, that's got the tank top on, and they're all, so and he's got pink pants on, and so
I think
there's
there's
a
a lot
couple
of 3D printed stuff out there. The difficulty is
Well,
finding
so there's a couple of companies out of England. One is called
England.
Model
Yes.
U, and they make 3D printed figures that are very, very good, very highly detailed, not cheap.
Yep.
I bought a bunch of them. There's another company that
Foreground
makes,
figures.
yeah, that makes them in metal that are also highly detailed. It's another company out of England, and the name escapes me. It's actually the gentleman's name.
Yep.
Um, I ordered some of those. Carl Oslinski turned me on to them, and they're not.
Not a 5-minute paint job though, probably.
No, they're not. And painting HO scale figures is not really something I want to spend a lot of time on,
Right.
because it's hard, and that's not where my
You know
skill
what you
level
need? You need some teenager that's into Warhammer.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The folks that are really good figure painters are, in my opinion, are true artists.
Right.
Um,
Almost a different hobby.
yeah, it really is a different hobby. So we're making progress. It's getting there. I'm starting to, put glue on the bottom of buildings and press them down onto the plywood, which
Yeah.
is
You're
a good
committed.
sign. Um, and so, hopefully in the next 4 to 5 weeks, this thing will be wrapped up, put in its
I'm looking
crate.
forward to seeing it in person. I will definitely go up there and look at it when you say it's ready.
Well, it's been, so again, and I probably mentioned this in September, there's a documentary that we're shooting that goes along with this. And it covers the prototype mills and the history of them, and then the recreation of them in miniature, and we'll wrap up with the opening of the exhibit.
It'll be on
Uh,
PBS, I assume.
well, we'll definitely be on YouTube. I don't know that it'll make PBS, but um, so that's also kind of a thing that's going along with this as I'm building the
Yep.
diorama. Um,
I'm
so
looking forward to it. And
yeah,
before we wrap up, I did want to ask you about Springfield because you went.
well, you can hear
I
my
can
cough.
hear.
Yeah.
How did I know?
Yeah. So, here's my takeaway. So I did
Did
go
you end
to,
up, you said you were just going to go pick something up, but you ended up walking through everything, didn't you?
so I had a buddy that I hadn't seen in about 6 or 7 years that called me and he said, "Hey, you're going?" And yeah. And he said, "Let's go together." And so, I more out of wanting just to catch up with him. I went. I had pre-ordered some castings from Railroad Kits, which is Bill Sartori's company, and he was kind enough to bring them and have them ready for me. And I had a couple of windows and injection molded stuff that I had to pick up from Tichy. Um, but I wasn't really looking for anything else. I did get caught up at the um, God, I can't. It's a company that does laser cut kits, and they're very innovative. Innovative.
ITLA?
You got it. Um, I did get caught up there, and I bought a bunch of roof details from them.
Yeah, they've got some interesting looking stuff.
Yeah, really, really, really nice stuff. And we made kind of a sprint through the buildings.
I heard it was very well attended, as usual.
Oh, it was jam packed by 11 o'clock on Saturday morning. It was wall to wall people.
Yeah.
My takeaway, and it's kind of been, nothing against the folks that run the show, they do a great job, is it feels like there are more and more white elephant tables
Hmm.
and more modular layouts. So
That's for the stroller set on Sunday.
yeah, it definitely is. Although, I think that that's become less of a just Sunday phenomenon and and,
Really?
and more of a show-wide thing. Um, and those are the two things that I would definitely not ever go there for.
Right.
Uh, there's also,
That's for the general public, right?
yeah, yeah, the percentage of things that attract me to that show are probably less than 10%.
I gotta say,
Um,
after my third year vending there, I thought, yeah, I'm good now.
well, and I did it for over
And I
25.
haven't missed it. And I know it's a wonderful show. And I know, you're gonna everybody goes and you're gonna see everybody there. It's just not me anymore. I'm a
Yeah,
I'm a small gathering guy.
yeah. I said to my buddy, I said, for me, there is kind of a selective amnesia that occurs. And so right now it's PTSD,
Yeah,
right? I'm hurting. Um, by the beginning of next year,
you'll have
like
forgotten.
I'll have forgotten the pain, and I'll be close to being ready to consider going again. So
Better you
uh,
than me.
yeah, yeah, I know. I'm never going to drag you there, and I would never try. I wouldn't do that to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just turning into a fart in my old age, right on schedule.
Well, that's our prerogative, right? I mean, been there, done. I was in Maine on business yesterday. I've got to drive back up to Maine on Thursday. Um, So, I'm still grinding. We still grind in this house. Tina, is the executive director of the food pantry in town, and I mean, if she works only a 60-hour week,
Oh, she's a mover, no question about that.
that's a short work week for her.
And we've got Karen's car that's 11 years old with 13,000 miles on it. It's
Well, they and so they,
literally, I mean, I'm not exaggerating. That's
yeah,
what it
yeah,
is.
yep,
And
yep.
my 6-year-old car has 36,000 on it.
You don't even go down the street.
My
I mean,
my my buddy John jokes with me. He says, "You leave the compound this week?" I said, "Yeah, I get groceries once."
yeah, but that's just 2 miles up the road.
Yep.
Yep,
Hard to build up mileage that way.
yep.
Listen, I want to
100%.
thank you for jogging me out of my ennui when it comes to podcasts here. I promise I'm going to do a better job of putting podcasts out. I will. It's been
Well, like I said,
unusually,
if I have to lead you by
unusually
the nose,
hectic period. I don't know really. I mean, I did that semi-retired thing, starting last fall, and I
yeah,
thought, beautiful, I'm gonna have all kinds of time. No,
backfill.
these little bundles of joy have come along and just sucked up all the oxygen in the room in a way that
Well,
I could not have
they're,
anticipated. So
they're
uh,
beautiful kids, and
the newest one is not even 3 weeks old. So we're getting ready to go down and see that one. We're getting ready to schedule a trip to fly down to Florida. I mean, this is what we do. It's not a bad
yeah,
life. I'm not complaining
no, it
at
isn't.
all.
And congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. And if it'll surprise you, is all I will say. Your
Yep,
first grandchild is like, oh, now I get
yep.
it. It's all the good things about a little kid with none of the bad.
Gotcha.
All right, well, next time, may have you back on the show. You seem to be pretty good at this. All right, folks, have a good one. We'll see you next time.